Welcome back to another lesson that I am going to discuss now. This part of our review for gender and society. So this topic that I am going to share with you is about the rhetorical shaping of gender, focused on men's movements in the United States. So the last time I've shared with you about the women's movement in the United States. So this time this will be about the movement of men. So let us know more. What is this all about? Is this the same with what the women are fighting for, or is it opposite, or it's just proportional? All right. So historically, American men have been less involved than women in gender movements because they already have the rights and privileges that many of the women don't have. So why would you fight for something you already have? No. During the first wave of women's movements, men opposed their efforts, but few had supported it. So basically, men's view of feminism are also diverse and conflicting. During the second wave, many supported liberal feminism, joined the NOW, or the National Organization for Women. Others began to explore issues in men's lives and challenge masculinity's ways constructed in America. So as we know, liberal feminism is more about fighting for freedom and for equality. So here, some men have initiated the effort now to study the issues on men, why they really incline themselves to what the history has been, men are doing. So like more on violence, to women. So like women's movements, men's movements are also diverse, conflicting, and others are in the middle. They supported the feminism, somehow not, while others are very extreme, totally opposing the efforts of feminism, and others are totally supporting. So men's movements are not independent of women's movements. So basically, almost kasabay siyang naitabo because this movement of men arose as a reaction to women's movements. So they react. So some men ally themselves with liberal branches of feminism. Some firstly rejected feminism and the feminists. So there are the first group of men's movement, or the pro-feminist movements. So the pro-feminist men's movements, or the progressive men or male feminists. So basically, they ally themselves to women. This has started in 1960. So these men work to bring their attitudes and behavior in line with the egalitarian ideology they espouse, egalitarian ideology for equality. So support women's battles for equitable treatment in society and participate in efforts to increase women's rights. One of their interests also is personal growth beyond restrictions imposed by society's prescriptions for masculinity. So somehow this group of men are being branded as traitorous identity, for they go against other men. So for Larry May, author of Masculinity and Morality, men find easy to dismiss women's criticism of sexism, but difficult to dismiss the same criticism when it comes from one of them. So one example, if a man tried to tease a woman, by sexual language, when woman reacted by criticizing the act of a man who did that, basically a man will just easily dismiss that by saying you're so defensive, you're so sensitive, like that. While if the criticism is coming from the same, no, from other man. So you are a man, you tease a woman for using a sexual language or sexism language, and then the other man criticize you. You became ashamed, no, you realize what you're doing. So basically what it tries to convey that if it's the man or someone who criticize women belongs to the same category, no. So it's us, it's the men who usually abuse and criticize women using sexism language. So by the time that you are being admonished or being criticized by the same gender, by the same men, it has a different impact. You're gonna realize something. So it says only one thing. The message is one thing, that a man has a message is more powerful. The other group are the NOMAs, or the National Organization for Men Against Sexism. So they sponsors workshops to expand men's awareness of ways in which their emotional development has been hindered and restrictive social views of masculinity. So the workshops attempt to help men change this state of affairs by offering guidance and becoming more feeling and sensitive. So their advocacies, they wanted to end violence against women. They wanted they are working to end men's homophobic attitudes and the cruel, sometimes deadly attacks on gays that stem from these attitudes. Third, continuing to develop and enrich men's studies at colleges and universities throughout the United States. And fourth, they speak publicly in support of women's rights and men's personal development. The next group of men's movement are the men's anti-violence groups. So they are committed to ending men's violence against women. The first is the White Ribbon Campaign, or the WRC. This has started in 1991. This group is the largest men's anti-violence group in the world. So this is an international group of men who are working to end men's violence against women. Begun when a group of Canadian men felt they had to respond to an appalling incidence of violence against women. So one example of the incident was on December 6, 1991, when 14 women were massacred in what came to be called the Montreal Massacre. They were students in the engineering school at the Université de Montréal. So the murderer felt that engineering was a man's field in which women had no rightful place, so he removed the women students from the school and from life. Unfortunately, some male students at the Université de Montréal felt they had to speak out and make it clear that not all men hate women and not all men would commit or condone violence against women. So only a few handful men met the issue. So only a few had started this group. So they use white ribbon as the symbol of men's opposition to men's violence against women. Only after a few weeks, more than 100,000 Canadian men wore the white ribbon. Wearing a white ribbon is a symbol of a personal pledge never to commit, condone, nor remain silent about violence against women. They are not male bashers. We don't think that men are naturally violent. There are justifications that they do not literally generalize all men, and they do not really criticize men for no reasons. So that's why they defend themselves when they call that they are male bashers. The justification is this: we don't think that men are naturally violent, and we don't think that men are bad. The majority of men are not violent. Researchers have discovered many past cultures with little or no violence. At the same time, we do think that many men have learned to express their anger or insecurity through violence. Many men have come to believe that violence against a woman, child, or another man is an acceptable way to control another person. The problem does not stop with physical violence. There are forms of emotional violence, from sexist joking to sexual harassment at work to other domineering forms of behavior. By remaining silent about these things, we allow other men to poison our working and learning environments. So their final strategy, the strategy of the White Ribbon Campaign of 1991, is to be vocal and active in supporting women's groups, particularly those that address violence in women's lives. So the second group of the anti-violence groups is the Mentors in Violence Prevention. So one of them, of the leaders, is Jackson Katz. He gives workshops and speeches all over the world, and he trains men in mentoring other men to reject men's violence. They aim to educate men about socialization that links masculinity to violence and aggression, and motivate men to reject violence in themselves and other men. So the next group, the third group, is the masculinist men's movement. So they are pro-masculine. So the first is pro-feminist, the second group are the anti-violence, and the third are the pro-masculine movement. So they believe that men suffer from discrimination because of their sex, and that men need to reclaim their manliness. They tend to ignore or denounce gay men. So the first group under this pro-masculine are the men's rights movements, the most conservative among all, whose goal is to restore the traditional roles of men and women, and with that, the privileges men historically enjoyed. The most extreme of them are called the free men, who see male feminists as soft. They criticize the pro-feminists as soft and unmanly, and denigrate them with the epithets such as the men's auxiliary to women's movement. They do not accept pro-feminists as part of their movement or part of the men's movements. So Warren Farrell, 1991, claims that men are relentlessly oppressed. So this is in reverse. The feminists are saying that they are oppressed. This group are saying that the men are oppressed by the 24-hour-a-day psychological responsibility for the family's financial well-being. They see themselves as oppressed because they are obliged to bring home a healthy salary, and that women won't love them if they are not successful and good providers. Men's rights groups, including the free men, think that discrimination against men is far greater and more worthy of attention and correction than is discrimination against women. These men say that it is actually women who have the power and men who are most oppressed by the current gender arrangements. To support their claim that men are oppressed, men's rights group point to issues such as military draft, shorter lifespans, more health problems, and child custody laws that favor women. So the second group under pro-masculine are the fathers' rights groups. Fathers' rights groups are angry and hurt that men don't have at least 50% custody of their children after divorce. They claim that courts discriminate against men by assuming that women should be the primary parents. One of the most known father rights group is the Father for Justice. So this is in England. They perform dramatic stunts to attract the public about custody rights of separated and divorced fathers. They don't have the custody yet required by law to provide full child support payments to the mothers. So they were discriminated through these questions. They wanted to answer that they are also capable of these questions now. So can fathers love their children as much as mothers? They wanted to raise that they are. Second, do children need their fathers as much as they need their mothers? They wanted also to speak out that they are also a need for by their children. Third is a blatant sex discrimination to give mothers an advantage when it comes to custody rights. So that's it. And the third group is the mythopoetics, or called as the New Age men's movements. So their goal is rediscovering the real masculinity through self-help activities, therapeutic workshops and retreats, not concerned with they are not concerned with political and social advocacy. They wanted also to rediscover their deep and mythic roots of masculine thinking and feeling, which they believe will restore men to their primordial, spiritual, emotional, and intellectual wholeness. Fourth groups are the promise keepers, or this group is faith-based organization by the evangelicals. No? So they wanted to bring about revival through global movement that calls men back to courageous, bold leadership. They calls men back to God's word, sharing their faith and caring for the poor and oppressed throughout the world. And the fifth group under the pro-masculine is the 10 million man march. It was a large gathering of African American men in Washington, D.C. on October 16, 1995. So they convey to the world a vastly different picture of the black male, and to unite in self-help and self-defense against economic and social ills plaguing the African American community. So those groups, they are really diverse, because the black men, primarily the African American, are also having their own initiative, as showing to the world that they wanted to correct this constructed inequality in the society that they suffer. So like primarily job opportunities, inequality or injustice when it comes to public utilities like comfort rooms. There are specific comfort rooms before in the United States that this is only exclusive for white man and woman, while the black men or women cannot access those utilities, and they cannot also enter to any restaurants, to any services if they are not white. And the sad thing with this is that there are more services offered to white people than to the black people. So that's why they wanted to show to the world that there should be equality to black and white alike, not to be discriminated because of color, because of gender, and because of their orientation or whatsoever. So like the feminist movement, it's very diverse as well. They're coming from white, they're coming from black, they're coming from liberal, they're coming from conservative, and so with the men's movements as well. So as I divided into three: pro-feminist, anti-violence, and then pro-masculine. So I would like to ask, which role would you like to play? So that's all for this review for this men's movement, and good luck for your exam next week.